So Star Wars is still one of the biggest franchises ever, but the prequels didn't really have as much love as the original trilogies did, at least at launch. So many people just hated them because they weren't the same as the original trilogy, which set a really high bar, to be fair. And the prequels weren't nearly as perfect, but they did have their own good qualities. Back when they came out, there was a ton of hate for it, and now this legacy has been stained a little bit for Star Wars. But it's kind of how like the sequels are today, but before the internet was a major thing. And now people just hate comment on anything that even mentions those movies. Not much was done after the prequels. A few things came out here and there. Some TV shows and some other random stuff were made, including another good Clone Wars show that made Grievous really, really cool. And they kind of undid that though with the movies for whatever reason, and now he's only just a guy who loses and then escapes every episode.
Time to abandon ship.
This show is before episode 3 premiered though, so it's his first appearance in anything ever, and they just kind of made him super cool in that series, but when it came to episode 3, they wanted to kind of undo that. Too similar to Vader. Honestly, didn't really care. I just want to see more badass characters, but they said no, so now we have him. But there was no real major premieres after the sequels came out for anything. There was, like I said, some miscellaneous stuff, but Star Wars was just not as relevant as it used to be. It still had a good following, but younger people especially that just didn't grow up watching Star Wars didn't care. And it wasn't really nearly as big as it is today, with 10 mediocre shows coming out a year and one really good one. But one small show on Cartoon Network made the biggest difference, making prequels just beloved, and a whole generation love Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka. And I doubt there's a lot of expectations for this random TV show on Cartoon Network, and it probably made it a lot easier for it to avoid hate and let them experiment with a lot of new ideas. I know a few are just taken directly from George Lucas's book of big ideas, which he had a lot.
I came up with the idea of General Grievous as a leader of the droid armies. He's kind of a little bit of an alien in a droid shell, which is sort of an echo of what Anakin is going to become.
I mean, this man will make paragraphs of lore for background characters, map out the functionality of ships that will never come up, and fill a book full of new characters, factions, and stuff that he just never used. So it's a pretty rich place to get some pretty good stuff that he hasn't been able to fit into a movie, or maybe it just wasn't good enough for one. But it's also nice that the show didn't have to deal with the comparison from the original trilogy, or the same expectations that a movie will. Although the Clone Wars movie maybe could have been a little bit more thought out than it was, because it was just a bunch of episodes thrown together that have literally nothing to do with each other. Later they ended up doing something like arcs, which is just the exact opposite of that. It's a bunch of episodes put together that are more coherent, but they're split up. But who would have thought a kid's show, honestly with not that high of a budget, could create such a difference? It paved the way to make prequels content as popular as it is today, because it's probably one of the more popular eras. And other than Disney just needing more money after buying Star Wars for a lot of Mickey bucks, they just keep making and making more stuff based on the prequel. I mean, they made the Tales of the Jedi, and they went ahead and made Tales of the Sith as well, which came out. And they also use a lot of characters from the prequels. I mean, Ahsoka just keeps coming back into stuff. Rex keeps coming back into stuff, and these are all just beloved characters. But this show is just one of the best shows, probably of television and of Star Wars ever. But how did this show become the holy grail and the golden standard of Star Wars? And why is it still so good after all these years?
Next time on The Clone Wars. Stranded on a remote world, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Isla find refuge in a peaceful village until the droid army arrives to hunt them down.
What menace have you brought to our village now, Jedi?
Struggling to stay neutral, the village is forced to choose or face certain doom.
You can't fight them alone.
Can the Jedi protect the innocent from the fury of war?
That's a lot of clankers.
Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Sunday night at 8 on Pearl.
So, Star Wars is many things, but story is usually kind of like the first thing you think about Star Wars and what you're praising it for. And they still have very good storytelling, like Andor is one of the best shows that I've seen in a long time from Star Wars. Mandalorian has had a lot of great season and great moments. Stuff like Boba Fett is a little bit more on the rough side, where the storytelling just isn't quite there. I don't know what Boba Fett's character is supposed to be defined by in this series, when we mostly know him as just kind of this silent badass, but he doesn't really do any of that in the show, so it's had some rough patches here, but there's still a lot of good moments. Clone Wars is very different with how it tells its stories, and they did most things that movies don't do as well as other shows don't do. I mentioned it earlier, but it's going to be arcs where they take one idea and split it up into a few different episodes, but they kind of reset just like most shows do after each episode. They'll reset fresh after a couple episodes once that story's told. And you can kind of tell when they do that because they'll show the famous voiceover.
Under siege, Separatist forces have launched a major offensive. Led by the evil droid General Grievous, Republic forces are pushed to the brink.
And I don't know any other shows that kind of do this in the same way. There probably is some out there that I just don't remember or haven't seen, but I really like that they do it this way. Usually you see shows go with just a full season of hints towards a big finale, or it's a very episodic show and each episode just does not matter to each other. There's still progress and character development throughout the whole series though, like Ahsoka becoming a Jedi, but for the most part it just kind of feels like a bunch of random collection of war stories. And it does a great job of creating new, interesting characters, planets, ideas, and just fleshing out the Star Wars world. And if anything is popular, they can use them for more episodes or other shows. And sometimes we end up with a fan favorite character, like, I don't know, I might be going to mention Ahsoka, but Cad Bane is huge. And he's been in the Bad Batch now and Boba Fett show. Star Wars has always made lore and stories for background characters, and sometimes even gave them figures. Like Malakili literally cries shirtless in one scene, and he got a couple. He had multiple figures. They used to only really develop these characters more in like comic books or just regular books, and the show makes a little bit more opportunity for some of these characters to make an appearance and actually do something, at least like an arc, and if they don't go well, just don't use them again. There are still mostly episodes focused on Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, but there are some other stories with other characters that are maybe not as much of a main character, but still get their own plots, especially the clones. They get a lot of episodes, just random different clones or kind of the main squad. But these weird stories and characters is exactly where I think Clone Wars is probably the reason why it's so successful, and Dave Filoni probably is a big part of that. For whatever reason, he really loves Plo Koon from the movies, just a background character, but probably because he liked the design. And to be fair, a lot of Star Wars characters have really, really cool designs, but never get a single word in the movies. But I mean, that's pretty cool. We get to see characters like that who maybe somebody thinks is really cool looking actually get some screen time, maybe even multiple episodes or major plot development. There's probably a similar reason why other characters were on the show as just somebody that they thought had cool designs and they wanted to utilize them. But I'm sure plenty of them were original characters too, just from this big book of George Lucas, like I mentioned earlier. And it's kind of cool to see a lot of this deep cast that they create for the show. And you just get to see all kinds of cool characters that you like, just kind of sitting there in the background doing literally nothing.
They're dissolving this thing in a molten salt, and they're doing electrochemistry on it. Why don't they call it molten salt? They want...
I mean, honestly, I just think I love some of these random characters that get introduced. One of my favorites, Tan Devo, is just basically Space Napoleon Dynamite, and he has just the stupidest look and way he talks, and he just has classic lines like this.
We need time to deal with this situation.
Time. There's no time for time. A murderer is on the loose, and it's my job to find him.
Which is a huge part of why I love this show, is all these crazy different characters you could just sink your teeth into. Honestly, Tan Devo is the most obscure and stupid character, but I make jokes about him all the time. I think he's like the funniest dude in the show. So I mean, to each their own, we can all enjoy our own stupid, silly little glup shittos. It does actually go over some pretty deep lore in some of these things for a lot of planets that you get to see mentioned in a one-off in a movie or a book or something like that. Like, you can actually connect a lot of Star Wars stuff to each other, which is a very interconnected way of telling story, and that's really, really cool. Makes it a lot more worth actually investing into Star Wars content, which is something that maybe I don't know people really talk about a whole lot, is that there's actually a reason to get into Star Wars and continue to get into it. And watching Clone Wars, you can absolutely see that. I mean, there's such an influence that this show has had on everything that's come after it, since it is kind of the beginning of TV shows for Star Wars, at least in this capacity. Stuff like Rebels is just so obviously inspired by Clone Wars. It's made by some of the same people, so it makes sense. One of the biggest things that it did do for Star Wars fans is bring back Darth Maul.
Slaughter of the innocent, mercilessly and without compromise.
For whatever reason, he was just one of the coolest characters, and they killed him in the first movie. Dude, people really wanted him to come back, and they did not disappoint bringing him back. They didn't do something stupid that gave him this semi-crazy Shakespearean way of talking.
Soon, the galaxy will be remade, and in the chaos, we must seize what power we can. It is not the way of your people to hide here in the gutters. If you die, I promise you, it will be on the field of battle. And if you die, you will die as warriors.
And the major cultural impact that I also want to mention is Ahsoka. I mean, this show has created this brand new character that blew up. There is so much merch, art, and just love for this character. I mean, she's this icon of Star Wars now in this trio of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and she's just kind of transcended a lot of other characters that were popular. It's just crazy to see how much there is about her, and her arc, deservingly so, is very, very good, which is probably why she gets so much love. I mean, she goes from this spunky kid with a lot of attitude, which is a perfect pair for Anakin because he also has a lot of attitude with his master, but they kind of bounce off each other, kind of like giving each other shit in like a really fun way, and it's great to watch and then see these characters kind of grow and mature as the show goes on, because there is a very different, more serious tone, because at the end of the show, spoilers, she is kicked out of the Jedi Temple. She hasn't seen Anakin in a long time. There's a lot of emotional impact too, because how many years we have grown up with this character. It is really well done. Now, on top of all this amazing character development, they put an insane amount of lore into this show in a way that everybody can kind of understand. I mean, you can generally see what these characters are inspired by in a lot of ways, and you can see kind of where their arc is. And if you just watch an episode and you don't know what happened last week, or you don't know what happened whenever, you can kind of catch up and kind of watch the cartoon as you normally would just on a Saturday morning, very, very casually. So it's not a problem being a casual watch, but on top of that, there's tons of references that are very easy to catch for the average fan who aren't walking Wikipedias. And on top of that, there are really detailed and specific lore that is really thrown in there and hidden that are utilized later on in other shows. So they make tidbits and then they utilize those tidbits in other shows to kind of reference it, loop it back, or they use tidbits from other Star Wars media and kind of reference back to those. So there's these really detailed moments and stuff that you just won't understand without being an insane lore master. So if you are or are not a lore master and god of knowledge on Wikipedia, which honestly, I'm not, my buddy is, so we have these differing opinions, but we both love this cartoon very much. So you don't have to be either person. You can be whoever you are and still watch and enjoy the show, which just credit to all the people working on it, Dave Filoni and many other talented people with their writing. Dave Filoni, who does, if you don't know Star Wars, a lot of stuff nowadays. He's the guy who headed Mandalorian, at least the original series. I'm not sure how much more he has done and has not done in his involvement nowadays, because he's kind of spread thin. He's kind of the Star Wars guy now. So there's a lot of stuff that he has to do, watch, manage. He has a lot going on, but he has done a lot of stuff. He's at Clone Wars, he's done Rebels, he's done Mandalorian, all very highly accredited things that deserve a lot of praise in and outside the Star Wars community. So honestly, this show is an insane level of quality for a kid's Saturday morning cartoon. This is not like, oh, this is for the hardcore fans. This is a Saturday morning cartoon they put on Cartoon Network that they did not expect to really be this level of popularity and love all these years down the way. They probably wanted it to be very popular, or at least do well, but there's no way they could have expected the absolute cultural impact that this show brought on.
The B-2 Super Battle Droid, armed with wrist-mounted dual laser cannons and protected by thick shields of Acertron armor. This Separatist heavy hitter is one you'd rather hit than be hit by.
Okay, so you get it. There's lots of cool Star Wars characters you can just fan over and make fan art of and obsess over, so that's really cool. But did you know that Ahsoka was hated at the very beginning of the show? Just everybody did not like her. Now, anybody who's listening that has actually been there since the very beginning, being online, looking at discussion boards and stuff like that, good on you for being around so long and being an OG fan. But a lot of you probably don't know a lot of what was being said on those boards, because a lot of the people who are watching that grew up on this is probably like 10 at the time and didn't really go online like that. If they were online, they were probably playing like Club Penguin or something. So if you didn't know, Ahsoka was really, really hated. And to be fair, at the very beginning of the show, it was a little rough. The writing was a little slow and a little bit dumbed down for like children purposes, because it was supposed to be just unknowing kind of Saturday morning cartoon and not the giant that it is today. So they wrote it as such. They still did bring a lot of great ideas in early seasons. Like season 1 was pretty good. There was a lot of concepts that were very interesting that they brought back and they utilized. So it wasn't terrible, but there was definitely some stuff where it's like, okay, it's a little slow. They're not going too crazy with some of the stuff that they did later that they went nuts with, like the lore and some very not kid-friendly scenes. Like Anakin just goes nuts in some of those seasons.
You will answer my questions.
Your feeble Jedi mind tricks do not work on Geonosians. The other Jedi already learned this.
Mind tricks? I don't need mind tricks to get you to talk.
I will never talk, Jedi.
We'll see about that.
Which is really cool because you get to see him kind of turn to the dark side slowly throughout the series instead of you jumping from it in episode 2 to 3. But yeah, it did really improve later on once they kind of figured out their footing for the writing, and the animation got a lot better too, because oh my god, the animation in the final season, I don't know what the budget for was in the first season, but the last one must have been like triple or more, because oh, it looks so good. Just look at it. Just look at it, dude. But yeah, you can see they really picked it up later in the series. The show looks 10 times better. It's written a whole lot different and fantastic. And Ahsoka became a lot more of a fun character to watch because her chemistry just kind of slotted right in with Anakin and Obi-Wan. A perfect fit, like she was always meant to be there. So it went from her being a little annoying, and I'll be honest, I kind of see it, where she's not really found her spot yet. And she kind of was a little annoying, kind of on purpose, so she can grow as a character. But then you see that growth, you see everything that Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka have been through, and it's really an amazing story from start to finish to watch. I mean, just the amount of improving from start to finish of this whole show. To be fair, it is 12 years from the season premiere to the finale, so I assume things should have improved, but it looks fantastic and is a lot better. What's left to say? It's a Saturday morning cartoon turned into an absolute franchise juggernaut. It did some really unique things like make the show CG, something not a lot of shows did. Although at first it wasn't really that good, it ended up being some of the best that I've ever seen. Jimmy Neutron still cannot be beat because it looks absolutely beautiful.
Breed's frozen!
Time for my dinner!
We're being chased by a monster!
But it's a close second. Now, Star Wars The Clone Wars is full of just our favorite characters, background characters, one-off, you know, people who only have a couple of episodes, but mainly Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka. But Obi-Wan and Anakin, kind of the main thing here that they've brought back from not being the best duo in like the Clone Wars, like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. But Star Wars The Clone Wars is full of our now favorite characters, whether it's a background character, it's a character that had just one arc or 2 arcs and just a few minor appearances, but still the primary characters are Obi-Wan and Anakin, who are just an insane difference, and they really brought them back from being not great characters in episode 1, 2, and 3. They were just nowhere near the popularity of like Luke from the original trilogy and those characters, but now they kind of are on par or close to those characters in a lot of people's minds. But I cannot imagine Star Wars without this iconic trio that we have today. Quartet, if you want to add Hondo, which I do, he does have main character energy after all, and he is their great friend, who flies a flying saucer. Just a legendary choice in a universe with thousands of ships.
This effort is no longer profitable.
Clone Wars has probably some of the most iconic plots for Star Wars that still people just write off because it's a cartoon. Here's just a few of my favorite arcs in no order to show what these people are missing out on. Pretty much all the Mandalorian arcs. Ahsoka being framed and kicked out of the Jedi Order. The Umbara arc, where Krong Prell reveals he's a Sith. Where all the droids save the day, which is George Lucas's favorite, so do not comment that it's a bad arc. Thank you.
Life is a void. We search and search for answers, but there are none. Hope is just an illusion, Whack. Death is the only certainty.
And I have never in any Star Wars content or any show seen just so many intense and interesting stories just being told consistently. Even if there is a kind of decent chunk of filler in some of these, there's just tons of quality. Even in season 1, there's just concepts of really, really cool stuff that I'll forever remember about Star Wars when I think about it. I do have one gripe that I want to point out, is that they put Jar Jar in a lot of early episodes. He already isn't a very fan favorite character. I can accept them trying to fix him like Anakin, but they just wrote him in the exact same way as the movies. And he also annoys everyone around him. It's very obvious, but they try so hard to say that he doesn't.
Jar Jar, what are you doing?
Oops, sorry, Mr. Fix-It.
Mac, what's going on back there? Sir, you must get out of the cockpit. We're hit! So you must leave. Get back into your seat.
I don't know what to say about it. That's just the weirdest thing that I've ever seen. And it took them too long to just not write a ton of Jar Jar episodes. They put them in quite a few.
Han Solo shot first. Don't let him go back on what he did. Thank you.
These are my movies. Kiss my ass. I'm George Lucas.
Overall, it's just one of the best shows, though, ever that I've seen. Not even just including Star Wars or cartoons. It's just such a great show in general to go back and rewatch. And there's so many reasons too, with all the rewatchability and all the small stuff that you might have missed, or the fact that they keep making stuff based on this show. You can go back and say, hey, this is what they based that on. It's so good and so rewatchable. And I don't care if you don't watch cartoons. That's a trash reason to not watch this show. Go out and watch it. It's just amazing story, deep lore, so many characters with good depth. Feel free to look up what's filler and skip it though. Not everyone needs to see C-3PO and R2-D2 go to a fruit market. That really was a huge waste of time. Make sure to leave a like if you like Star Wars content and dislike it if you don't. Make sure you subscribe for more. I'm probably gonna plan on doing more cartoon related content or just TV shows and maybe video games. So subscribe for any more things just like that. Thank you.
That's the biggest trap people fall into in these kinds of movies, is they go too far. I may have gone too far in a few places.